Yes. Yeah, I've learned a lot from having to do. I've worked remotely for my job the last 2 years, so I've learned a lot about Zoom meetings. Fortunately, the company Zoom meetings, we never use cameras. So if I'm working early in the morning, I don't have to bother getting dressed to go to work. I try to make it a point to get up and shower at some point during the day. It's like if I just get up and sit down at my computer and start working, I'll talk to somebody because you can't see how I look from how I talk. But
the next person who says new normal gets punched in the throat.
That's right. That's absolutely right. But I mean, I do like the fact that we're doing more Zoom, and I'm taking great advantage of it on the Masonic side. But
I'm actually making this presentation for the great Priory of Victoria, Australia in a couple of months, which is kind of exciting.
That's great.
Fortunately, I'm a part of a York Rite that has a lot of young techies, and I don't know if they'll want to go back to live meetings. They love doing this via Zoom.
Right. Well, you still have to have the live meetings to do some things, but there's no reason you can't have a blend of the two.
Well, the Grand Encampment has finally taken their feet off of our throats so we can confer the Order of the Temple again.
That's good. Well, like, for example, our Research Lodge, who's hosting this, we only meet 4 times a year, but there are a lot of people interested in research. So this is getting popular, and we're going to continue to do it when we're not meeting. So I don't know how long I'll be able to do it every week, as long as there's interest, I suppose. Finding speakers is the problem now, is trying to loom people up. So
there's a great program coming up with Masons Without Borders on Kill Winning.
Oh, I need to check them out. People have recommended them.
Mm-hmm.
And your mic's still kind of loud, Carson. I'm sorry.
Is this better?
That's better. That was good. You were at the right volume. You're like me. I'm watching TV. My wife comes in. Can you turn that down? Oh, yeah. As soon as she's out of the room. Oh, crap. This is going to get recorded. Well, she doesn't watch these anyway, so I'm safe.
Right. One word of caution with regard to Masons Without Borders. I just received an email. They said that we would love to have you, but understand that we have everything from EAs and up. We have women. So depending upon your jurisdictional position on co-masonry, that could be a problem.
Well, but no, this is, I mean, our meetings are open to anybody. You don't have to be a Mason to attend these meetings. We're not making judgments on regularity here.
Oh, no. Everything I present is monitorial. No great Masonic secrets that you can find by Googling them.
Yep.
The night before my Master Mason degree, someone said, oh, great, tomorrow you get the Master's Word. Well, I Googled and it came up spinning on 3-dimensional letters. So, yeah. Great Masonic secret.
Yep.
If it wasn't for the anti-Masonic Christians, I couldn't do ritual.
That's right. Hello, Brother Sorensen. Good to have you with us. And you're muted.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Nice to have you here. And where are you from, brother?
Milton, Wisconsin.
Oh, very good. As always, I don't know how many people to expect at these things, so we have, Carson, we have people who, sign up on Facebook and say there's X number coming, but I never trust that, because in reality, regardless of how many people say they're going to come, it never seems to match up how many actually come. So it's just sort of a rough guess for me.
Well, typically there's a window of 5 minutes following the starting time when people start to sign in.
Yep.
And I've found out through these presentations that Masonic daylight wasting time is not peculiar to Indiana.
Ah, yes, very true. So I've listed as 10 going and 49 interested. That's about typical for these events, but we have them every week. And I never know. I mean, I don't think we generally have at least 10 or 12, no matter what. But I'm trying to build it up. I want to make sure for the speaker he gets a decent-sized audience for him.
The audience isn't important to me in terms of number. As long as there's an interest, I'll do it for 1, 2, or 3 people. I don't count scalps. Last night I gave a live presentation at a lodge open house, and there were only 6 Masons that showed up. But you know what? That was the longest Q&A I've ever had. so it was worthwhile.
Oh, good. Oh yeah, I love the Q&A. Well, that's why I want to make sure I have at least a decent sized audience that will ask questions. Like we had our Jewish professor who gave a talk, and he could not speak on Saturday, and he offered to record it early and then broadcast it. But it's like, no, I want the Q&A. There's no point in I could interview you, or you could send me a clip and I'll play it, but I much prefer the Q&A.
What is so stunning when you're presenting is you get to the end of a presentation and you say, I will be happy to entertain questions. And then you get this stone silence. So you either nailed it or you lost them after the first slide.
Yes. Or half of both. Morning, Brother Neil. Nice to have you here.
Good morning. Good to be here. It's another beautiful day in the neighborhood.
Absolutely. Yeah, we typically have... there was 5 of you waiting to chomping at the bit to come in when I turned it on, and then we're kind of dribbling in. But I tend to get them up to 10 minutes after we start. So
that's not unusual. It happens everywhere.
Yep. I did have, if y'all remember, Joe Martinez gave a talk here 3 weeks ago. I'd have to look it up. Recently, he gave a talk on the different Masonic. I can't think of what it is, like the Ahaman Razan and all of the early Masonic sources for us. You know, he gave that talk, and I caught him. He gave a talk about Enoch at the Grand. I thought it was the Grand Royal Arch, but it was the Grand Council of Utah was the host, and they have a regular presentation on Tuesdays, and they asked me to give a talk there sometime, so that should be interesting.
Great.
Talk on Cryptic Masons to them, but it's nice to see Brother Joe, and I think there was a couple of us Virginia Masons who were there for him, so he appreciated seeing someone else that he knows there besides.
Well, this is so much better than climbing on airplanes and flying from coast to coast. It's great.
Greetings, Masonic Misfit.
What's that?
Neil. Greetings,
Sorry?
Masonic Misfit.
What did you say?
I said, greetings, Masonic Misfit.
Masonic Mystic.
Misfit. Yeah.
Misfit. You know, as in your post in the... No, I'll go crawl back in my hole, mate. Don't worry me.
Well, that's kind of thematic. A good friend of mine described Freemasons as a bunch of odd eggs trying desperately to act normal.
That's fair.
Because our interests are pretty obscure.
It's too early in the morning, Brian.
Yes.
Right.
It's hard to have an inside joke when you're the only one inside, Brian.
Exactly.
Write that down.
A year ago today, ESSA started their drop-ins.
Oh, that's right. Happy anniversary to you all.
So we're doing it now for a whole year.
That's awesome. And you kept it going.
Oh, I know what you're saying.
Thank you.
All right. Here's some more.
Another one.
Gordon.
Yes, happy anniversary. Like I said, it's too early in the morning. I have a breakfast Zoom on Saturday mornings with 4 or 5 friends here in Ontario, and this morning we started at 7:30 instead of 8 o'clock, so it's too early in the day.
Fair enough.
So you're in Ontario.
Yeah.
I'm huge in Canada.
Are you? Yeah. Where are you from, Carson?
Indiana.
Whereabouts?
Center, Indianapolis.
Okay. Yeah, I'm 2.5 hours east of Detroit.
There you are.
Are you still are you East Coast time or Central time? You know,
East Coast.
You're still East Coast. How about
Same
that?
as you. Same as you. Yeah.
I know, but you're a bit west of me though.
Yeah.
Well, Indiana has 2 different time zones. Our northwest and southwest corners are on Central, so it's kind of a nightmare.
Right. Well, is it Indiana where part of the state doesn't do daylight savings time?
Well, that changed, but we used to say in Chicago it's 6 o'clock, in New York it's 8 o'clock, and in Indiana it's 1955.
That's right.
Yeah.
But when you leave from Virginia to West Virginia, you have to remind people to wind your watch back 100 years.
Right. Well, the challenge was that we did so much business with the Detroit automakers, and half the year you couldn't reach them because they were already closed.
Right. One thing I liked about living in Arizona is they refuse to participate with daylight savings time. So it's just one less thing you got to worry about. I think it's a tremendous waste of time.
We hear that debate every time we spring forward and fall back.
Yep. No one does anything about it. Brother Carrera, morning to you, sir.
He's muted.
Hi, everyone.
There you are.
Oh, there you are.
Hey.
Hi, how are you?
Hello.
Good to see you again.
Hey, nice to see you, everyone.
And remind me, you are calling from where?
I'm from Argentina.
Argentina. So
Argentina.
good to have you here, brother.
Good to see you again.
Happy to be here. Good to see you, again. How are you all?
Good, mate. Good.
That's good. And for my British brothers, I do want to say condolences on the loss of Prince Philip, 99 years old. Impressive he's lived that long. And I keep
Good
forgetting
life.
he was a Mason, since he's him not being the senior British royal. He's not the Grand Master, so of course we don't think of him as such. But I forgot he is a Mason as well. He's been around for a very long time. I don't know how active he ever was in the craft. Do you have any idea, Brian, or
I think that's an interesting thing. I don't think he was particularly active, but he did carry on paying his dues right up to the very end.
Right. Well, that's something.
Oh, yeah.
Well, what I find, and that's something maybe I want to cover in some future talk or something, is how the Brits do your Grand Masters. How it's as I understand it, it's the presiding, the Grand Master is the senior member of the royal family who is a Mason. So if Prince Charles was a Mason, he would be the Grand Master. As it is, it's the Duke of Kent. Has been for quite a while, actually. When I found that out in the 90s, it was the Duke of Kent. So he's been there a good long while. Do you know when's the last time a king was Grand Master, or have you had kings?
That was King George the Sixth.
Fifth? Sixth?
And so the last time there was a king, a Grand Master, was about 1953 when he died.
But the monarch's not allowed to be a Mason, a Grand Master.
Well, I've heard that, but are some that are? Because I've heard some I have been.
No, they aren't.
Okay.
Because my background there, that's one of my Knights Templars preceptory. And in our archives, we have a letter from the Prince of Wales resigning, and as he says, he resigns regrettably because on the death of his mother, Queen Victoria, he has to take the crown.
Wait, you're saying that the monarch cannot be a Mason?
He cannot be Grand Master.
Or cannot be Grand Master. Okay. Well, so if, say, the Duke of, hypothetically, the Duke of Kent is the senior British royal who's a Mason. He's Grand Master now. If, I don't know, a bus took them all out and the Duke of Kent was suddenly the king, he would simply resign as Grand Master. He'd still be a Mason.
He'd still be a Mason, but he would have to resign as Grand Master.
Right. Okay.
I've got an article here from Freemasonry Matters about King George the Sixth, and it says, well, where are we? Well, basically, it says that he was both. He was king, and he was also Grand Master.
That's interesting.
I'll put the link in the chat, then anyone can check it and have a read for it themselves.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because I've heard both. I've heard what the original thing I heard from a British Mason was that the senior, as I said, the senior royal who's a Mason is Grand Master. But then I've heard people say, well, the king can't be. So.
No, he's not allowed to be.
Yeah. I can certainly
on a similar but different note, I hope all of you know the name Thomas Dunkerley. He profited greatly from royal patronage. Maybe that's the distinction.
Or not.
No one knows Thomas Dunkerley?
He was allegedly the illegitimate son of George
II.
But
and he was the one who
that he wasn't.
He removed part of the Master Mason degree and assigned it to the Royal Arch.
Oh,
which is why he gave birth to a great sales pitch here in America.
Right. No, I'm afraid I know duck about Duckerly. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, great character.
Still, it's impressive the man lived to be 99 years old. You know, my understanding, and this is, Carson, you understand, most of the people who attend this meeting have been British. Brian has brought in quite a few of his misfits. And so I tend to have more Brits and Scots and all than Americans on these talks. So it's kind of opening up my world here. But
that's good company.
My main understanding of the royal family has been from watching The Crown, which I know is not a documentary. It's not a documentary. No. It's based on various books. So I'm sure there's a lot of liberties taken. So I think some things have been stretched, like minor events that really didn't matter as much, or they didn't actually react that way. They still happened, but they dramatized them greatly. Like, you know, Margaret did not actually confront her mother over this event with the retarded children that were members of the family.
Right.
But there were members of the royal, I mean, they did exist. It's just that the scene between Margaret and her mother didn't actually take place. But it's interesting to see Charles, especially Philip, who I know so little about. He's just that tall guy who stands with the queen, and I know he's not the king because she was born to it and he married into it. That's all I knew about him. But watching the younger version in the first 2 seasons was great. I could relate to that Philip. I mean, he was a military man. He didn't like the fact that he knew what his job was. He accepted his role. He didn't really like it, and he kind of chafed against it. But it was like he was a likable guy, although his friend was a bit of a man whore. But but still, I mean, you learn. I can relate to those 2 characters, especially from the first season when they were much younger. So I found it interesting. I know it's not historically.
Do you suppose at this point in time that Prince Harry would like to take back some of the things he and his wife said?
Entirely possible.
Timing was everything.
Yep. I always found it interesting that, I mean, growing up, I mean, Charles and Di got married. I was like 15, I think. I knew, I mean, the Queen Mother, who was actually born on my birthday, lived to be well over 100. And then you had the Queen had been in power for 30 years at that point. And I was thinking, well, the Queen has to die before Charles can be king, or her mother has to die so she can step down, because she would not be anything still a Queen Mother running around, and she would lose all titles. So it's like, well, once the Queen Mother dies, the Queen can step down. But now Charles is into his 60s. Now he's into his 70s, and so he's gonna have to step down. And it's like, is there a way he could step down and let
William
let William be the king, because he would still be young, and there'd be an energetic young king.
Evidently, popular opinion favors the very thing you've proposed, because Charles is not especially beloved from popular opinion.
No. And honestly, he's quite old. It'd be kind of silly to have a guy who's in his 70s crowned the king. I don't know. I mean, I know it's all... I don't really understand the Brits. I mean, I do from my perspective here. I don't live there, so I don't fully... I only know what I get through the media, so I realize it's filtered. But
they don't elect television stars to be their monarch like we do.
Well, yeah. Well, we've done it twice now. As we've had 2 actors in the White House. But it's
well, I'd say we have a third, but please continue.
Well, I mean, we have 2 actors who became president. We have quite a few presidents
right.
who think they're just acting, but
yeah,
that's what it is.
Sure.
But I just found it. I just found it interesting, the whole dynamic there. You know, watching from afar, it's like the Queen goes on and on and on. Her mother lived to be over 100, so you know, obviously the Queen's not going anywhere. And then Charles is far too old to take office, and he was never popular anyway. It's like, why can't he just find something interesting to do with his time and give up all hope of being king? I mean, I would find something to do.
Sure.
Some interest to throw yourself into, some worldwide.
He was born into wealth. He could do all kinds of good things.
Yeah. And they just forget about the idea of being king. But I don't know.
Right.
I think England would benefit greatly from a young King William, I would think. That would do wonders.
The problem is that since basically he was born, he's been told he's going to be king, and he's been trained to be king.
Exactly. Yes.
I think for him to actually step down would be an incredibly big thing for him. And I
It does.
don't see him doing it. I don't see him being king for long, but I don't see him standing down.
No.
It doesn't hurt that his wife knows how to behave.
Exactly. Yeah.
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 Yeah, and I gathered that from the Crown episodes as well, where they showed Queen Elizabeth basically being trained. You know,
Sure.
It's like the potential will happen. Of course, they didn't expect her father to die at so young, but that was the thing, and they made that clear. And that, I guess, that's what's fascinated me. And again, I know it's dramatized. I get that. Don't tell me it's not historically accurate. I know that, but just the very concept of her being drilled, being groomed to be the queen, and that's it. That's because you're the oldest. And you're not a male, so you're going to be queen, not king, but you're going to be drilled for this. And then when she's in her 20s saying, I need to find a tutor and actually learn some of this history and such, because all I know is how to be queen. I don't know a damn thing about anything any other school kid has. So she hired the tutor and asked him, it's like, he says, what do you want to know? She says, well, pretty much everything. I have no clue. So tell me what I need to know.
Well, let's just hope that the royals have learned to avoid American divorcees.
Yeah. I don't know. We seem to catch one every couple of generations.
To dreadful results.
If we want to undo the British monarchs, we just launch all of our divorcees at you.
Fair enough.
Morning, Brother Clayton. Nice to see you, sir.
Good morning. How are y'all doing today?
Good. Oh, Brother Day is here too. Good to see you, Brother Day.
Good morning.
Did you manage to catch Joe Martinez's talk? I think I saw you signed on there.
Yeah. Was it a bit 2 nights ago, right?
Yep, that was great.
Yeah.
I didn't. This is one thing I take issue with this. In this chat here, I allow anyone to chat with anyone. Okay, and I don't know if I know it's a setting, and I think most places, since I think most of the people who host Zooms they make the effort to actually pay for a subscription like we do here. My DMLA chapter, my son's in, just uses the free one, so they're limited to like 40 minutes, So the people who do the free thing are limited, but if you have a Zoom subscription, you can set the settings and allow anyone to chat. Most of the ones I'm on they make it so you can only chat directly to the host or the co-hosts. And I guess they do that to limit what people say or whatever, I guess. But I kind of take issue with that. I would rather keep this open. Any of you can direct message me, and I won't publish the direct messages. But I do post the chats. I'll clean up anything that shouldn't be there, but that's rare. But I'd rather all of you be free to chat to the entire group, so you can share your lodge website, any upcoming events, if you have questions, whatever. It's kind of strange to go somewhere else. It's like I wanted to say hi to Brother Day in the chat, and I couldn't. And I wasn't going to speak up during the meeting, of course.
Oh, yeah.
But it'd be nice to just message someone, hey, good to see you, man. And we weren't allowed to do that because of the restrictions they put on. So I'd rather it be a little more open here and let people chat with each other. Anyway, just wanted to share that. It's kind of like passing notes in school. We should be allowed to do that.
You almost threw him off with your questions.
Oh, that was fun. Yeah. Well, I had one question after another. That was the thing. I wasn't trying to run the show, but it's like, well, yeah. Well, that made me think, wait a minute, what about this?
But it was quite revealing that there were actually 2 lines of Enoch.
Right.
But they were just like cousins. So basically, it was like 5 names recycled.
Yeah, that's why I brought that up.
So it's very confusing.
The lineage of Cain and the lineage of Seth.
Yes.
Multiple names like Enoch and Lamech and Methuselah, although spelled differently, all appeared in both of them.
Yeah.
So it was it's like we just only had so many names back then, but it was quite clear those were different people, lived at different times. But they used the same name. So I found that interesting. The whole story of Enoch is just, I keep learning more and more about it. I touched on it in my talk for the research chapter. I mentioned the vaults, and then of course Joe's whole talk was all about Enoch and his biblical history and his history in the Talmud and his history in the Quran and in history. So Joe had really good performance. I might have him give that talk here at some point. But I'm going to make a link to it on the group page. I think we have enough people here. We're at 20 minutes after. So want to welcome everyone. This is Virginia Research Lodge's weekly unstated meeting. I'd like to welcome you all here. Today our guest speaker is Worshipful Carson C. Smith. And in his presentation, he has his introductions. So I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody except for him. And go ahead, Brother Smith.
Are we at share screen? There we go. Yes, this is the point of beginning. In the symbolic lodge, the newly initiated entered apprentice is presented with the lambskin or white leather apron. It is an emblem of innocence and the badge of a Mason. But after men became Masons, they sought further light in Masonic orders of Christian knighthood, choosing to wear their own distinctive Knight Templar apron. So far as I know, and unless I am mistaken, Prather Yorkwright is the first and only body in the state of Indiana that has made the Knight Templar apron the subject of serious inquiry. By way of introduction, my primary motivation in becoming a Freemason was that I wanted to become a Knight Templar, like my grandfather, Sir Knight Leonard Roy Land, pictured on the left, who was a member of Knightstown Commandery No. 9. My grandfather was presented with his 50-year award of gold by Sir Knight Willard Meredith Avery, pictured in the center, at Golden Rule Lodge No. 16 in Knightstown in 1958. Sir Knight Avery, who was a past commander of Knightstown Commandery No. 9, had already served as the 95th Grand Commander of the Grand Commandery of Indiana in 1956 and 57, and went on to become the 45th Grand Master of the Grand Encampment from 1976 to 1979. I submitted my petition for the degrees of Freemasonry to Calvin W. Prather Lodge No. 717 at 8707 Haverstick Road in March of 2004. And from April through November, I was initiated, passed, raised, exalted, greeted, and knighted at Calvin W. Prather Lodge No. 717, Prather Chapter No. 157, Prather Council No. 100, and Trinity Commandery No. 62. With an active membership of over 200 companions and Sir Knights, and having the lowest median age in the state of Indiana, the Prather Yorkwright bodies are able to confer all of the degrees and orders in-house in full form with allegories and lectures. As a means of preserving our history, Sir Knight John Bridegroom of the Master's Craft has placed the arms of Jacques de Molay at the center of the newly created Prather Multijewel. In anticipation of our centennial, he has included the date of the original charter. In 2008, I became a founding member of Levant Preceptory, a degree team that confers the Order of the Temple in period Templar dress, operating in conformance to Section 260 of the Constitution of the Grand Encampment, and using as its official uniform ceremonial robes conforming to and consistent with the historical traditions and practices of Templary. In 2015, I was appointed to serve as the Grand Master's aide and banner bearer for the 67th Knights Templar Triennium, and in 2018, I was appointed to serve on the Grand Encampment Membership Committee for the 68th Knights Templar Triennium. Having top-lined the petitions of 170 new Sir Knights since my own knighting in November of 2004, I was given the opportunity to collaborate with Sir Knight John Bridegroom of the Master's Craft, who is also a member of Levant Preceptory, to create the Grand Encampment membership brochure with a panel that serves as a Yorkwright petition. My subject is the history of the Knight Templar apron. Prior to 1717, there were Freemasons' lodges in England, Scotland, and Ireland, with the earliest known admission of non-operative Masons being in Scotland. 4 lodges came together at the Goose and Gridiron Ale House in London to form the Grand Lodge of London and Southern England on the Feast of St. John the Baptist on June the 24th, 1717. The Goose and Gridiron was a parody of a musicians' guild called the Swan and Harp that met at the Ale House. William St. Clair of Rosslyn, the 21st Baron of Rosslyn, was elected the first Grand Master Mason of Scotland when the Grand Lodge of Scotland was formed on the Feast of St. Andrew on November the 30th, 1736, 19 years after the creation of the Grand Lodge of England. He was a direct descendant of another William St. Clair, the 11th Baron of Rosslyn, who in 1446 received the charter for the construction of the Collegiate Church of St. Matthew, which was never completed and is better known as Rosslyn Chapel. When the Grand Lodge of Scotland was not yet 12 months old, Scottish Freemason Andrew Michael Ramsay, pictured on the left, an exile living in France, who was a tutor to Charles Edward Stuart, or Bonnie Prince Charlie, pictured on the right, the last of the Catholic Stuarts to lay claim to the throne of Great Britain, delivered a welcoming address that has come to be known as Ramsay's Oration in a French lodge in Paris in 1737, in the course of which he explained that the Masonic Brotherhood arose in Palestine during the period of the Crusades under the protection of Christian knights, with the object of restoring Christian churches which had been destroyed by the Saracens in the Holy Land, but he made no mention of the Knights Templar. France undertook the creation of rites and degrees of Masonic knighthood, no trace of which can be found prior to Ramsay's Oration in 1737. Their prototypes were the Knights of Malta, the Knights of the Holy Sepulchre, the Knights of St. Lazarus, all under papal charter, patent, or seal, and the Order of Christ under the patronage of the Portuguese crown. When the story of a secret perpetuation of the Knights Templar arose within Freemasonry, the Templar element overshadowed the pretensions of the other chivalric orders, or more correctly, it simply outshone them all. The first Masonic chivalric order to advance the story of its Templar origin was the Strict Observance, founded by Baron Karl Gottorf von Hund, pictured left and right, in Germany in 1751. The story goes that the ancient Templar order began in poverty, but Baldwin II, King of Jerusalem, gave them housing in the vicinity of the site where Solomon's Temple had been built. When it was put in repair by Hugh de Payan and the rest of the First Brethren, their digging operations unearthed an iron casket which contained priceless treasures. Chief among them was the process of the great work in alchemy. In other words, the secret of transmuting base metals into gold, as it had been communicated to Solomon by Grand Master Hiram Abiff, and which, in the speculative sense, serves as an allegory for taking good men and making them better. Thomas Dunkerley, the illegitimate son of George II and a veteran of the British Royal Navy, was made a Freemason in 1757. He went through the 3 degrees of ancient craft masonry at the Lodge of the 3 Tons, number 31, one of the Navy lodges of Portsmouth, which met at the pub with the same name. In 1767, Dunkerley received the appointment to Provincial Grand Master of Hampshire, and in that position he founded a number of naval lodges in the county. That first official appointment represented a sign of the high esteem in which he was held by the Grand Lodge of England, and in particular its royal patrons, the Prince of Wales, who was the Grand Master of the Order, the Duke of Clarence, who was the patron of the Holy Royal Arch, and Prince Edward, who was the patron of the Masonic Knights Templar Order. The Grand Lodge of England had authorized Thomas Dunkerley to revise the existing ritual, and the result was that he removed part of the 3rd degree and gave it to the Royal Arch. He also introduced the Mark Mason degree and conferred it for the first time on the Brethren of the Portsmouth Royal Arch Chapter of Friendship number 257 in September of 1769. The earliest written record available mentioning the Knights Templar in America is to be found in the minutes of St. Andrew's Royal Arch Chapter in Boston, which was called a Royal Arch Lodge at that time. On August the 28th, 1769, Captain William Davis, for whom no image is available, a past master of British Army Lodge number 58 and a member of St. Andrew's Lodge, was, reading from the minutes, accepted and accordingly made by receiving the 4 steps, that of excellent, super excellent, Royal Arch, and Knight Templar. Proceeding from left to right, the second Knight Templar created in America was silversmith and engraver Paul Revere, pictured in the center, who was knighted on December the 11th, 1769. And the third Knight Templar created in America was physician Joseph Warren, pictured on the right, who was knighted on May the 14th, 1770. Note that this was just 5 years prior to the American War of Independence. William Davis proposed the barrel defense used at the Battle of Bunker Hill, which was a simple but effective tactic that consisted of barrels filled with stones and earth that were rolled down on the British Army. Paul Revere was well known for his involvement in the Boston Tea Party and was immortalized in Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's poem about his famous midnight ride. Joseph Warren played a leading role in patriot organizations in Boston, held the title of presiding Grand Master of Massachusetts when he was created a Knight Templar, and when he lost his life at the Battle of Bunker Hill. In the years following the conclusion of the American War of Independence, Thomas Dunkley proposed the centralization of the scattered Templar groups in England. On July the 24th, 1791, he informed the York encampment of Redemption that he had been invited to assume the office of Grand Master by the Knights Templar of Bristol. York favored the proposal, and in due course, Dunkley accepted the office. The groups referred to his authority in 1791 included the Observance of London, the Redemption of York, the Eminent of Bristol, and the Antiquity of Bath. Dunkley became the Grand Master of the first national Grand Conclave of the Royal Exalted Religious and Military Order, Herodom, Kadash, Grand Elected Knights Templar of St. John, of Jerusalem, Palestine, Rhodes, and Malta. His energy and organizational zeal contributed to the growth of the order until his death in 1795. While little has been written on the dress of the early Masonic Templars prior to Thomas Smith Webb's Monitor of 1797, there has been one suggestion as to the origin of the Knight Templar apron. In the history of Templary in Great Britain, the following significant reference is made. All Templar encampments were qualified to give the degrees of Rose Croix and the Kadash, which had existed in England as Templar degrees years before the establishment of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite. In the original form of the Templar ceremonies, the Rose Croix of Herodom was one step above the Templar installation, followed by the Kadash. Rose Croix is French for Rosy Cross, but more often than not, in Masonic circles, it is pronounced Rose Croix. Herodom means the realm of heroes. Kadosh is Hebrew for holy or sacred, but more often than not, in Masonic circles, it is pronounced Kadash. The significance herein is the fact that Templary was related under British Masonry to the Rose Croix and Kadash degrees. The Rose Croix apron is described as follows: white, lined in black, and outlined in red. On the white side, depicting a pelican feeding her young. On the black side, a red Latin cross. In medieval Europe, the pelican was thought to be particularly attentive to her young, to the point of piercing her breast and feeding them with her own blood when no other food was available. As a result, the pelican has become a symbol of the Passion of Christ and of the Holy Eucharist since the 12th century. This imagery is perpetuated by the Scottish Rite chapter of Rose Croix. My introduction to the Knight Templar apron was made upon the occasion of my first visit to the George Washington Masonic National Memorial in Alexandria, Virginia, during the Shrine Imperial in Baltimore in July of 2005. A large portrait of the Marquis de Lafayette, the French aristocrat who was made a Major General at the age of 19 in the Continental Army during the American War of Independence, dressed in a long coat, wearing a black triangular apron featuring a skull and crossbones, is on display in the anteroom to Alexandria Washington Lodge number 22, which is holden under the Grand Lodge of Ancient, Free, and Accepted Masons of the Commonwealth of Virginia. President James Monroe invited the Marquis de Lafayette to the United States as the nation's guest in 1824. Lafayette visited all 24 states in the Union where he was met with a warm reception. For the purposes of comparison, I have included on the left the 1824 portrait of Dutch-French painter Ari Scheffer that is on display in the U.S. House of Representatives side by side with what now appears to have been a rude copy of the original, but with two significant additions: the Knight Templar apron and a collar with what appears to be the jewel of either a Royal Arch High Priest or the prelate of an encampment of Knights Templar. According to the New York Commercial Advertiser, at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning, September 11th, 1824, Lafayette, escorted by some of his Masonic brethren, attended a meeting at St. John's Hall of Jerusalem chapter of Royal Arch Masons and Morton encampment of Knights Templar in New York, in which he was exalted and received as a member. Lafayette's secretary wrote in his diary that the Marquis and his son were present at a Masonic celebration of the Knights Templar, who conferred on them the highest dignities and gave them richly wrought insignia. It appears from other references that Morton and Columbian encampments, now called commanderies, joined forces for the occasion. Thomas Smith Webb, pictured on the left, was a printer who received his 3 degrees of ancient craft masonry at Rising Sun Lodge in Keene, New Hampshire. On September the 14th, 1797, he published the Freemason's Monitor, or Illustrations of Masonry. This small volume, which is now very rare, consisted of 2 parts. The second part containing an account of the ineffable degrees of masonry, together with several Masonic songs written by the author. The first written standard for the Knight Templar Apron was published in Thomas Smith Webb's Monitor of 1797. It should be noted that Webb was only 26 years old when this work was published. In the Monitor of 1797 and in subsequent reissues, Thomas Smith Webb includes the following in Part 1, Book 3, Chapter 3, entitled Observations on the Order of Knights Templar and Knights of Malta. Aprons, white with a black border, or black with a white border, the flap black, and a skull and crossbones embroidered in silver thereon. Historically, the aprons of the Craft Lodge and its derivatives are rectangular in shape, while the aprons of the so-called higher degrees and the orders of Masonic knighthood are triangular. By way of example, on the left, we have the Scottish Rite 14th degree apron with the ineffable name of deity in Hebrew at its center. On the right, the 32nd degree apron with a symbolic representation of a Scottish Rite encampment at its center, courtesy of Red Tower Regalia in Arlington, Virginia. I have created a timeline for 18th century Freemasonry in England, Scotland, France, Germany, and the United States that lists the events that precede, coincide with, and follow one another in the relatively short span of 100 years. Rest assured, I will not be reading it to you, but I will be happy to make it available upon request. It is to Thomas Smith Webb that the first recorded standards of Masonic ritual and ceremony are attributed. Webb recast some of the degrees and completely reconstructed others. Webb's standard was accepted by the early Masonic Templars, and it was not until after the formation of the Grand Encampment in New York in 1816 and its subsequent publishing of the Grand Statutes of 1839 that a new design was agreed upon. In Chapter 4 of the General Statutes of the Grand Encampment of 1839, the following description of Templar dress can be found. Article 1. The costume of a Knight Templar shall consist of a full suit of black, dress coat and pantaloons, white cravat, black gloves, boots, and gilt spurs, all over a white surcoat, on the left breast of which shall be embroidered a red cross, a cross-hilted sword, the scabbard of black leather suspended from a black velvet or leather baldric, a short dagger on the left side, a black velvet apron of triangular form having on the center a patriarchal cross, and on the flap a skull and crossbones, all in silver. The edging of the aprons and collars shall be gold for grand bodies and of silver subordinate commanderies. But there is some doubt as to the adoption of this resolution by all commanderies subordinate to the Grand Encampment. In the 1859 edition of the Craftsman and Freemason's Guide by Cornelius Mord, the apron is described as black velvet of a triangular form, trimmed in silver lace. On the top or flap is a triangle with 12 holes perforated through it. In the center of the triangle is a cross and serpent. On the center of the apron is a skull and crossbones, and at equal distance from them in a triangular form, a star with 7 points, in the center of each star, a red cross. And that is a more accurate description of the apron that was worn by Reverend William H. Raper of Ohio, who is pictured on the right. Sir Knight Raper had acquired a reputation throughout the West for the excellent manner in which he conferred the orders of Masonic knighthood. And the General Grand Encampment of the United States issued a charter to Raper Encampment, now Raper Commandery No. 1, in Indianapolis on October the 16th, 1850. The Grand Encampment edicts of 1859 and 1862 made major changes in Knight Templar dress. The original edict in 1859 changed the frock coat from black to white and simultaneously abolished the wearing of the Knight Templar apron. It is challenging to locate examples of the white uniform. The figure on the left appears in reverse, but that is the nature of a woodcut print. We do have this portrait of Albert Pike, who is pictured on the right. On the left side of the frame, a river and what appears to be the bridge that leads from Palestine to the realm of Darius the king. On one side, the Jewish banner. On the other, the Persian banner. On the right side of the frame, the banner of the illustrious Order of the Red Cross and the grand standard of the Order of Knights Templar. Both are topped with what the Grand Encampment calls the Patriarchal Cross, bent to one side as they usually are, and planted in an encampment of round tents or marquees, also known as pavilions. Pike is dressed in a white knee-length frock, white leggings, a black cape lined in white, a black sash worn from the right shoulder to the left waist like a baldric, and a white belt with a passion cross on the buckle. Black boots with white tassels, a black wide-brimmed hat pinned to one side with a white plume, a sword suspended from a white frog, white gloves, but no Knight Templar apron. Although Pike is standing in front of what appears to be a commandery backdrop, he is wearing a Scottish Rite collar, prompting many observers to insist that this is a Scottish Rite Kadash costume, which only begs the question, why would Albert Pike be wearing a Scottish Rite costume in what appears to be a commandery setting? One way or the other, Pike was an enthusiastic champion of the York Rite, Templary in particular, who included the following in a collection of essays published in 1871 and entitled Morals and Dogma of the Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite. One reason why you are urged to become affiliated with the York Rite is that the world is today in greater need of the Order of Knights Templar than were the heroic crusaders of the 12th century. There is more at stake, more to save. You will find in the precepts of this institution a renewed conviction that right must prevail, that oppression by any class whatsoever is wrong and incompatible with Christian thought. It still combines a religious and militant spirit and is pledged to defend those principles and ideals upon which civilization is based. The original black uniform, pictured on the left, consisted of a black military-style frock coat, gloves, cuffs or gauntlets, a chapeau with a black plume, a black baldric, a black Knight Templar apron with cross swords on the bib and a skull and crossbones on the center, a belt, sword, and scabbard. In 1862, the Edict of 1859 changed the black frock coat. It was changed to the black frock coat worn by subordinate commanderies. The revised white uniform, pictured on the right, consisted of a black military-style frock coat, gloves, cuffs or gauntlets, a chapeau with a white plume, a white baldric, a belt, sword, and scabbard, but no Knight Templar apron. A provision was made in the edicts of 1859 and 1862 to allow commanderies formed before 1859 to continue to wear the old or black uniform. But there was staunch opposition to the uniform change in commanderies where the black uniform, including the Knights Templar apron, was in use, and in an age of dirt roads and travel by horse, the white uniform would have been impossible to keep clean. The Grand Master's interpretation of the statute of the Grand Encampment was doubted and denied, and the order was disobeyed by most, if not all, commanderies still wearing the black uniform. Prior to 1859, the clothing worn by the Knights Templar of the United States was determined only by a traditional rule and consisted of black dress with the richly decorated baldric and apron. Opposition to the edicts of 1859 and 1862 was quelled by an agreement on a compromise whereby the old commanderies were to be exempted from the operation of the law. Nevertheless, Catalog number 56, published by the M.C. Lillian Company of Columbus, Ohio in 1890, 30 years after the widely rejected edicts of 1859 and 1862, offered no fewer than 6 variations of the black uniform that included the chapeau, baldric, apron, gloves, cuffs or gauntlets, belt, sword, and scabbard, priced from $36.25 to $98.75. Following the conclusion of the American Civil War, fraternal societies created uniform drill teams that were outfitted in military-style frock coats, belts, swords, and scabbards, and plumed head covers. Many of these men had been in the military and enjoyed the discipline and camaraderie that a drill team provides. The Knights of Pythias sword, which is used as the Tyler sword in several Indiana Masonic lodges, bears the initials UR, which stand for uniform rank, on the clam-shaped crossguard or quillon between two griffins. The emblem chosen for the organization was the lily, and the uniform rank of the Knights of Pythias became known as the Army of the Lily. What distinguished the Knights Templar from other uniform fraternal societies was the baldric and the apron. Please note, a baldric is worn from the right shoulder to the left waist. A sash, on the other hand, is worn from the left shoulder to the right waist, and this information will serve you well should you become a member of the Allied Masonic Degrees or the Knight Masons. The Knight Templar baldric displays, from top to bottom, a triangle in the center of a black rosette, the Malta Cross, a 9-pointed star representing the 9 original Knights of the Order, with a cross and serpent on a red background at its center, encircled with the motto, In Hoc Signo Vinces, a square and compass in the center of a black rosette, and a dagger suspended by a ribbon. The metal fittings on the Knight Templar baldric, which were available in silver for Sir Knights and gold for eminent commanders, represent the symbolic lodge, the Royal Arch Chapter, the Order of the Temple, and the Order of Malta, which used to follow the Order of the Temple. The Knight Templar apron, which was trimmed in silver for Sir Knights and gold for eminent commanders, was an acknowledgement of our connection to ancient craft masonry and featured cross swords on the bib in addition to the skull and crossbones in the center. The Knight Templar apron draws its symbolism from the past to create a connection between the ancient Templar and the Masonic Templar. The black of the apron reminds us of the martyrdom of the last Grand Master Jacques de Molay. The cross swords, that we will wield our swords in defense of innocent maidens, destitute widows, helpless orphans, and the Christian religion. And the central and most striking image on the apron, the skull and crossbones, is a reminder of the mortality of the body and the immortality of the soul. Looking to the ancient past and coming full circle, the rule of the Templars outlined a detailed code of conduct governing every aspect of daily life, including clothing. The first draft was composed in 1129 and dictated 68 rules for the members of the order. Written in Latin and French over the course of 150 years, the original documents no longer exist, but they are known to us through subsequent translations. What is especially noteworthy is the claim that the ancient Templar was required to wear a sheepskin girdle about his waist at all times as a reminder of his vow of chastity. The C. Ward Company was purchased by Oak Hill Cap and Gown Company of Salem, Virginia in 1978, inspiring former employee Barney Thomas to launch Thomas Creative Apparel in New London, a manufacturer of choir robes, caps, and gowns, and Carl Bone, Paul Hausman, and Jim Erickson to establish an entirely separate company, New London Regalia, which has been in business since 1981, manufactured and sold Knight Templar aprons, baldricks, and Knight Templar swords with blades that were engraved with a skull and crossbones and the motto Memento Mori, or remember death, that, like the Knight Templar apron, serve as an invitation to contemplate our own mortality in the light of our knightly obligations, so that with faith and humility, you should let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. The very words of Jesus of Nazareth spoken during his Sermon on the Mount and recorded in the Gospel according to St. Matthew chapter 5, verse 16. According to the C. Ward Company price list effective January 1st, 1958, Knight Templar aprons ranged in price from $15.40 to $19.80. Note that there were variations of the Knight Templar apron that incorporated fringe, crosses, triangles and stars arranged in a triangular form, but the one constant is the skull and crossbones in the center. Knight Templar swords ranged in price from $30.90 for a silver or nickel-plated sword with a wooden grip to $62.85 for a gold-plated sword with a Persian ivory grip. For the purposes of comparison, in 1958, the median annual family income was $5,000. The average price of a new car was $2,000, and the average price of a new home was $12,000. The Knight Templar apron was not merely a grim reminder of death. Witness the smiling, tuba-playing member of St. Paul Commandery of Dover, New Hampshire. Nor did it blunt the enthusiasm of the uniformed Sir Knights of Palestine Commandery No. 6 of New London, Connecticut. Note the daggers tucked into the belt of every officer, save for the prelate on the left, who has a crozier or stylized shepherd's crook at his station. The Knight Templar apron was not hidden away in the asylum, neither was it concealed from public view. On the contrary, it was worn in the company of the ladies of DeWitt Clinton Commandery No. 2 of Portsmouth, New Hampshire. The Sir Knights of Columbia Commandery No. 2 from Washington, D.C. wore their Knight Templar baldricks and aprons while visiting George Washington's tomb at Mount Vernon. The Sir Knights of California and Nevada wore an elaborate variant of the black uniform, adding a richly embroidered cape and gauntlets and a wide-brimmed slouch hat turned up at the side and clasped in place with a rosette and Templar cross. Note that in the photo on the far left, the baldric is worn incorrectly, on top of the cape and from the left shoulder to the right waist. The Sir Knights of California and Nevada had their own variation of the Knight Templar apron featuring cross swords on the bib. On the center of the apron is a triangle, skull and crossbones, with embroidery, or in the case of the photo on the far left, 3 7-pointed stars in a triangular form. I would be remiss if I failed to mention the fact that Prince Hall-affiliated Knights Templar wore the baldric and apron, which, in the photo on the left, displays a paschal lamb and a cockerel or rooster on the bib, and in the photo on the right displays a triangle on the bib. I've included an illustration from the May 7, 1884 issue of Puck, the first successful humor magazine in the United States, published from 1871 until 1918. Though Joseph Kepler was a vocal critic of the Catholic Church, he did not see much difference between the Catholics and the Freemasons, whom Pope Leo XIII had attacked on April the 20th, 1884, in a papal encyclical stating in part, "The Church's negative judgment in regard to Masonic association remains unchanged, since their principles have always been considered irreconcilable with the doctrine of the Church, and therefore membership in them remains forbidden. The faithful who enroll in Masonic associations are in a state of grave sin and may not receive Holy Communion." The Pope is pictured on the left wielding a crozier or stylized shepherd's crook with a banner that reads, "You're a humbug, and you dupe the people," with not one but 2 exclamation marks. The Sir Knight on the far right, who is wearing a baldric and Knight Templar apron, is holding in his right hand a staff with a banner that reads, "You're another," in all capital letters, and in his left hand a green bottle labeled mummery. Merriam-Webster defines mummery as ridiculous ceremonies, especially of a religious nature. One of the most prized acquisitions in my personal collection of Templar artifacts, books, catalogs, and photos is this postcard entitled 10 Nights in a Barroom, postmarked Carthage, Missouri, May the 26th, 1909. See how perfectly the cartoonist has captured the details of the Knight Templar baldric and apron. But let us be clear. The Grand Commandery of Indiana hosts a dry hospitality suite at its Grand Conclave and frowns upon Sir Knights wearing their uniforms in bars, pubs, or taverns. On the other hand, Grand Encampment events feature hospitality suites that are generously stocked with top-shelf wine and spirits, demonstrating the point that a dry hospitality suite is just a suite. Someone thought it was a good idea to portray Fred Flintstone in the aprons of all 4 York ride bodies, pictured from left to right. The Lodge, Chapter, Council, and Commandery. But with the passing of time, the image of the skull and crossbones fell victim to the negative associations made by uninformed members of the general public. The skull and crossbones and the motto Memento Mori disappeared from Templar swords. And as confirmed by this illustration that appeared in the October 8, 1956 issue of Life magazine, and which remains my favorite representation of the degrees, orders, and allied organizations of American Freemasonry, the Knight Templar apron was, for the most part, and with few exceptions, no longer worn, despite the fact that the Grand Encampment has issued not one decision forbidding the wearing of the Knight Templar apron since the widely rejected edicts of 1859 and 1862. The Grand Masters of the Grand Encampment have taken the opportunity to create their own Knight Templar apron. This is the apron that was designed to be worn when attending non-uniform Masonic functions. It is a black rectangular apron bearing a purple Salem cross at the center, the Knight Templar seal on the bib, trimmed with purple velvet and embroidered in gold bullion. Question: can you wear an apron with your Knight Templar uniform? Answer: it is not addressed in the manual of Templar jurisprudence, but the question of aprons does appear in the digest of approved decisions from Grand Encampment. The decisions start with the 1940 triennial and holding that an individual or group of Sir Knights can appear in uniform without official permission. The permissions are only required for public appearances, which means organized group activities. In particular, Grandmaster Orr's decision number 2, dated August 30th, 1943, and approved at the 1946 triennial, states in part, "You have a perfect right to put on the Templar coat, covered in part with an apron, and appear with the rest of the brethren in lodge or chapter." This ruling appears to address only individuals doing so and is silent on official group appearances. When I'm invited to present the York Rite 3-minute drill as Masonic education in a Blue Lodge setting, I arrive in uniform, uncovered, and wearing a rectangular craft apron. When I'm introduced by the Worshipful Master, I ask him to set the lodge at rest, remove my apron, don my sword and chapeau, and move about the lodge. Antique Knight Templar aprons appear regularly on eBay, and currently there is an opportunity to purchase the entire Knight Templar kit, including frock coat, baldric, apron, belt, chapeau, calling cards, programs, and ribbons from the 1895 triennial in Boston for $995 on Etsy. But New London Regalia continues to offer the Knight Templar apron in silver metal with silver trim for $101, silver metal with silver fringe for $142.25, gold metal with gold trim for $121.50, and gold metal with gold fringe for $170. All Knight Templar aprons from New London Regalia have an adjustable belt. Allow 4 to 5 weeks for delivery because they are made to order. While there are in fact cheaper imitations of the Knight Templar apron available online, this offering, for example, is available on eBay for $56. They only serve to confirm the adage attributed to John Ruskin, the leading English art critic of the Victorian era, who wrote, "There is nothing in the world that some man cannot make a little worse and sell a little cheaper, and he who considers price only is that man's lawful prey." But why would today's budget-minded Freemason make a $100 to $200 investment in a Knight Templar apron that is no longer required by regulation, when Templary at every level was, is, and shall remain for the foreseeable future the most costly Masonic body to which one may belong, and when the Sir Knights of Indiana are already purchasing caps and mantles, frock coats and chapeaux, CPO jackets and Persian caps, and or chainmail and steel helmets? Because a new generation of Freemasons has fully embraced the more esoteric aspects of Templary. The Chamber of Reflection, which first appeared in the lodges of France in the middle of the 18th century, and is now making its way back into the traditional observance lodge. The Triangle, the 5 Libations, the Ode to the Skull, and the Knight Templar apron, which predates the military-style frock coat and chapeau by not less than 100 years, and is documented to have been worn in the 18th, 19th, and well into the 20th century, is an acknowledgement of our connection to ancient craft masonry and to the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, who were also known as the Order of Solomon's Temple, or simply the Knights Templar. I have included a list of my primary source materials, listed chronologically by their date of publication. This list includes 25 publications covering 5 slides. Rest assured that I will not be reading it to you, but I will be happy to make it available upon request. I would also like to acknowledge the original artwork of Sir Knight John Bridegroom of the Master's Craft, who designed and produced the logo for the 2016 bicentennial celebration of the Grand Encampment, the committee badge for the 67th Knights Templar Triennium, the new multi-jewel for Prather Commandery number 62, the Grand Encampment membership brochure, and my own personal business card. Sir Knight Sidney Lelewin of Pinworld, who designed and produced the committee badge for the 68th Knights Templar Triennium, and Gregory Stewart of Fine Art America, who created the Chamber of Reflection. Finally, I would like to acknowledge Sir Knight Ron Blaisdell, whose 1989 essay on the history of the Knight Templar Apron launched me on this journey, and whose personal counsel directed me to treasures heretofore undiscovered. Please send me your reviews. Your reviews will receive full attribution and be used to promote future presentations. My email address is carson.c.smith@gmail.com. I am on Facebook at carson.c.smith. All of my websites and social media are linked to my Facebook profile. I welcome your friendship, and I am happy to answer your questions. This concludes my presentation of the history of the Knight Templar Apron.
Any questions? That was a very in-depth presentation. I appreciate that. Covered a lot of material. Any brother have any questions?
It's kind of like a bowl of puffed wheat. The more you chew on it, the bigger it gets. So this is the point where I assume I either nailed it or I lost him after the first slide.
Well, you just had one question more aligned with joining the Knights Templar. I've heard two things. Either you had to be Christian for it or you have to be specifically Catholic. I don't know if that really applies here or not.
We have a phenomenon here in the state of Indiana. Part of the petition for the Knights Templar is that you vow to defend the Christian faith. So we had kind of an anomaly in the city of Indianapolis where a wonderful gentleman who did dramatic work at the Scottish Rite Cathedral, who happened to be Jewish, petitioned for membership in Templary. And they said, are you willing to defend the Christian faith? He said, absolutely. If it wasn't for the Christian knights who arrived in GI uniforms, there wouldn't be a Jew left in Europe. So he was brought in as a member, and he actually rose to the office of eminent commander. So the joke that was told in the state of Indiana is that we had a kosher commandery.
I would certainly think Catholic would not be applicable since General Brother Kurt, the Catholic Church really hasn't, all they've done is lightened up their distaste for Masonry. It used to be outright banned for a Catholic to be a Mason. At the present, it's, I'll say it's discouraged. I don't know for a fact it's still banned, but it's definitely not encouraged in any way. So no.
Indiana has quite a few Roman Catholic members with the understanding that if the door is locked, it's on their side only. Yes. We have no restrictions. So if someone voices reservations, we always tell them, take it up with your archbishop.
Absolutely. There's nothing in Masonry, Brother Kurt, that says a person of a certain religion cannot be a Mason. It has always been on the side of the church saying you can't go join the Masons. But there certainly are no Masonic bodies that require you to be a Catholic to join. That would be a bit of an oddity.
Not surprising. I think it was Benedict was the last pope who made an outright condemnation of Freemasonry.
Yep. So, but yeah, there is some debate, as Brother Smith touched on, is like my understanding since I became a knight is that the Commandery exists for Christians who are Masons, period. You're defending the Christian faith. In theory, I guess it is possible for someone who is not a Christian to join, but that's who it's geared for. So when people say that's simply not true, it's like, well, it pretty much is. It's on the petition. Are you a Christian?
Well, it's also kind of problematic because in the Order of Malta, there's actually a point where the prior leans over the altar and points to the cross on his chest. He says, "Do you believe that Jesus died for the sins of the world?" That's pretty specific. So
Right.
that goes a bit beyond simply defending the Christian faith. That seems to be a tacit acknowledgement of the key claims of Christianity.
Right. It's just funny when I see people online who say, "Oh, that's not true at all." Well, actually it is. Yes. To be in the Commandery, you must be a Christian. Yes, that is I think it's pretty straightforward. Every Grand Commander I've ever spoken to on the subject says, yes, of course, that's just silly. The implication is, for those of you, well, most of you all are older than me, it looks like, but at one time to join the Shrine in the United States, which is by some, not me, considered to be the ultimate goal. You joined the Blue Lodge. You showed, Carson, you did show that triangle of steps, which I love that picture.
That's a great picture.
To join the Shrine in the United States, you must be a Mason and either a Knight Commander, meaning you join the Royal Arch in some states, the Council, and the Commandery, or you must join the Scottish Rite and become a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Mason. Only then may you join the Shrine. So some lay it out as that's the ultimate path for every Mason, and you pick one side or the other, but you're certainly allowed to join both. I have no interest in joining the Shrine, haven't ever, but the Shrine totally removed that requirement because for quite a while, many Shriners want to get rid of the requirement to be a Mason altogether.
Mm-hmm.
I'm opposed to. But
why would I let
take out? They managed to take out the whole appendant body requirement, so you can go straight from the Blue Lodge to the Shrine. Go ahead, brother.
Why would any thinking man who's had involvement with the Shrine allow his wife, mother, sister, or daughter in a Shrine building without the Master Mason obligation to keep them in check? Well, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And the fact is, the Shrine keeps trying these calculations where they think they can blow their membership up, and it hasn't worked. Their membership has remained stagnant. In fact, it's plummeting because of the age. Yep. Now, I wanted to mention something else that you hinted at. I sometimes get this objection for people on Facebook because Facebook is where we go to argue with strangers, and they'll say, "Well, I object to Knights Templar because I thought that Freemasonry was non-sectarian." Well, let's be frank. I spend 90% of my Masonic career pretending I'm an Old Testament Hebrew, so let me spend 10% of my time as a Christian Knight, and I'll be happy.
Absolutely. Welcome, Brother Mike, who joined us late here. Good to have you here. Yeah, the thing, to touch on that, I don't understand this mindset. Good to have you with us, Brother Mike. The thing is, you can join the Blue Lodge and be of any religious orientation you like, as long as you believe in a supreme being. And we don't even want to say God, because apparently something that's being exclusionary. As long as you believe in a supreme being, you can join Masonry. You can be a Christian, you can be a Jew, you can be a Muslim, you can be a Catholic, you could be any faith that allows for the existence of a supreme being. One could argue, I guess, if you wanted to make the argument, whether a Buddhist could be a Mason, since there is no supreme being unless you say, well, we're all part of the supreme being, so I believe in all of us. I guess you can make that argument. I don't know. But the whole point is the Blue Lodge has no such requirement. The fact that another body exists somewhere within Masonry that has a religious restriction has absolutely no effect on the Blue Lodge. To say that, well, I'm not going to stand for you having that thing over there that has different restrictions. Well, it's different. You can't join the National Sojourners at one time unless you were a commissioned officer in the U.S. military. And then they made it to petty officers, and then they made it anybody in the military. You're allowed to have an appendant body that has tighter restrictions than the Blue Lodge. It has no effect on the Blue Lodge itself. And I think it's unreasonable for a person to say, I'm opposed to that body having tighter restrictions. You don't have to join it. It's not, you don't have to join it. You don't have to join the Blue Lodge and then join the Royal Arch or anything else. So it's
exactly.
on you is my point.
So by way of illustration, I've been a Mason now 16, 17 years. I always opt to serve as senior deacon if I can get the job. And I have seen our Masons obligated on the Tanakh, the Holy Bible, the Quran, the Jefferson Bible, the Gita, the Vedas, and of all things, the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Now,
Wow.
what's interesting is that I had a young man approach me, and he says, "I'm interested in being a Freemason." I said, "Great." I said, "Do you have a book upon which you can be obligated?" He said, "Well, I'm a Wiccan." I said, "Okay." I said, "Is there something upon which we can obligate you?" He said, "Well, I want to be obligated on a pan of dirt." And I said, "Well, you know, in a post-literate society, I don't think that's going to play very well in our Masonic lodges. Is there some other book that you can point to as an authority?" And he said, "Well," he said, "I'd like to use my Book of Shadows." And I said, "What's a Book of Shadows?" He said, "It's my personal journal." I said, "Well, that's pretty risky, because what you're claiming is that you yourself at any given point in time is the ultimate moral authority in any aspect of your life." And all of a sudden I had this brain, this wonderful revelation. I said, "Hey, here's an idea. How about the Old Farmer's Almanac?" I wasn't kidding, because they're all about cycles and seasons and the movements of the planets and Mother Gaia. He thought I was making fun of him. So it went no further at that point. But it is a challenge.
What do you end up using?
He walked out. He wanted no part of it. He wanted dirt or his journal or nothing else.
Well,
so I don't think he would have been necessarily a contributing member of the lodge ultimately.
Well, that's the reality, and that's something I think it's important is we're all in, those of us who are here for these sort of things, I want to know more about Masonry. They want to understand more about Masonry than what they get in the 3 degrees and the lectures. We're digging for more information. And I think it's important for every Mason to dig deep into the meaning for why we do what we do. And an important thing, the whole reason you're obligating yourself on a Bible, and the whole reason that you must have some faith in God is, if I ask you to take an obligation to keep the secrets of this body and to defend the other brothers and to whatever else your obligation says to you, if I'm just asking you to obligate on your word alone, that's not good enough. I need you to obligate to me on something that you hold sacred. Thus, you're going to keep your obligation because you promised before your God or what have you that you're going to fulfill your obligation to me and the other members of the lodge. So it's the Bible. So it's something that has great sacred meaning to you. Otherwise, I have an obligation at all.
I must confess, my only real disappointment with Freemasonry is that I have seen none of that sexy Satanism that the anti-Masonic Christians promised me I was going to see.
I know.
Those Jack Shep comic books we used to find in the gas station restrooms. Yes. I've seen none of it. So I feel like I got jacked.
You did. Apparently you missed out. I don't know. Maybe you have to join the jesters. I don't know.
The other point of it is that I'm always amazed when anti-Masonic Christians launch on one of their tirades. I explain to them that in my lodge, we have word-perfect ritualists who, in the Order of the Temple, will talk about Jesus being taken before the Roman governor Pilate, or they will talk about the Feast of Unleavened Bread. They've never seen or heard these words before, so they don't know how to pronounce them. So in a very real sense, we are bringing a Christian heritage to an unchurched generation who otherwise would have missed it altogether.
Good point. Well, you can't reason with them, but that's why we're not supposed to engage in them. But that's a whole separate topic in itself.
Right.
Those of you who, and I think most everybody here is a member of the Research Lodge, but just for the sake of, or member of our Facebook group anyway, I'm going to go ahead and post. For those of you who may not know, this is being hosted by Virginia Research Lodge. We have a Facebook group. I'm posting here in the chat for you the link to our Facebook group where we announce upcoming events, our website where we put our research papers, our YouTube channel, which is where we post all of these weekly unstated meetings once I edit them, clean them up a little bit, and then my email address if you can't get hold of me any other way. Best way to get hold of me is through Facebook via messaging. That's how I keep track of things the best. But you're all more than welcome if you would like to sign up for our weekly research paper. What I do is I'm going through the archives of Virginia Research going back 70 years now. And I'm currently in I'm on 93 here. I'll show it actually. Let me do this. Sorry. Let me turn off my filter. My background. Where's my background? Turn that off for a sec. Here. This is our transactions. This is our 93 is the one I'm currently working on. But I'm scanning these books in, and I only have a couple left of our transactions. And then I'm going to have to go to the Grand Lodge and actually dig up the old minutes and the early copies of papers and scan them in. So we're digitizing all of our research papers and making them available online. And I email them out once a week to people on our group. You have to sign up. You have to message me directly to be added to the email list. But you can find the papers on our Facebook group, and you're welcome to read them there as well. But we have a number of them from the 90s that were taking on the church attacking us, and taking on these very things that Brother Smith brought up, and they're defending our position rather well, actually. But there's a whole lot of stuff. This is what's interesting is I'm reading things. I didn't join the lodge, the research lodge, until 95. So I've already covered the years since I joined, and then we stopped doing the transactions in the 2000s. So I have a gap after there I have to go and find. But I'm currently going through the papers from the 80s through the 90s, which from our earliest transactions to where I left off in 95. And these are from before I joined, but I see these papers being presented that have topics that would be perfectly relevant today. If you're reading these papers, you can imagine someone reading that very paper in your lodge today, other than events such as when the Southern Baptist Convention meant on something. The topic themselves, the very subject matter is absolutely relevant today as it was back then. And they bring up the same issues that we have of the apathy in Masonry, the lack of interest of Masons have in learning about research and so forth. But it's fascinating to go back and read what men wrote 40 years ago plus, and that we're just reading about, that I'm just reading about now, but sharing with a much wider audience. So there's a lot of good stuff there. I did want to, are there any other questions for Brother Smith about his presentation? Before we wrap up? Go ahead, Brother Day.
So just a few questions. Now regarding the apron, are there any commandery bodies outside of the United States that use that particular apron, or is this something that's very peculiar to the States? And also, go ahead.
First point, unless I'm mistaken, I think the skull and crossbones and the cross swords on the bib in a triangular pattern are peculiar to the United States. I've not seen examples from overseas.
And the other question is that other commanderies overseas and other places, usually you would see the Knight Templars and the Knight Mortars having different, I don't know, tunics, and I don't know what you call them.
Yes.
Different crosses and
caps and mantles are the capes with the pillbox shaped hat that people wear.
Yes.
Ironically, in Indiana, we kind of regard the cap and mantle as the last step before surrendering the charter. It's not fair in the sense that we bring our candidates through the Royal Arch, the Council, and the Commandery, and we lift them to their feet after the Order of the Temple with tears still streaming down their face, and we'll say, hey, wasn't that lovely? Oh, it was the most inspiring thing I've ever seen. It is beautiful, isn't it? Would you like to be an officer or a Commandery? Oh, very much. Do you have $1,000? What? Yeah, you're going to need about $1,000 to buy the sword, the chapeau, the uniform, and we never tell them that coming in, and that's really a disservice to the candidate because it is an expensive proposition. What I am finding in my conversations with a lot of young men is one of the principal obstacles to their becoming Templars is the cost of the uniform and feeling like they're full participants. I would not be surprised if with the passing of time, you might see people start to shy away from the military style uniform and go back to the black suit with an apron because it just makes more sense. For some reason, at the time the American Civil War was raging, as if they didn't have something better to do, they came up with all this military regalia, which basically was moving military surplus.
I would think you could get a chief's coat pretty inexpensively. We have a running gag. There's a dear fellow who passed a few years ago, who was Grand Commander of Virginia, who was his name was Bob Oman. Rob Oman was a a retired sergeant major in the U.S. Marine Corps, and people used to chide him and said he joined the Commandery so he could finally wear a chief's uniform.
Well, there's also the question of stolen valor. If
Yes.
I'm out in public and I'm not wearing the chapeau and the sword, I look like I'm a chaplain in the U.S. Navy, and it's always problematic for me when someone walks up and says thank you for your service, and that's when my hands go up in the air. No, I'm just playing soldier. This is not a real military uniform.
That is interesting. Maybe I think if you're in the military, fine, or I mean, even in a Blue Lodge, people can walk in there with their ceremonial military uniforms and even fire service. That is allowed. Even the police, right? They do that as well.
Yes.
So you can tell, yes.
One of the sales pitches we use for military veterans when they come into Templary, we say, oh, you're going to love Commandery. Well, no, they don't, because in Templary, you always start with your left foot, and they're used to starting with their right foot. And the commands that we give are not actually infantry commands, they're cavalry commands. So it throws them all off.
Okay, I do need to wrap this up because my son has boxing today. So it's Boxing Day, yes. He rather enjoys it, but I do need to wrap this up. I appreciate everyone participating. I do want to announce that next week we are going to have Masonic Mania 2. Hopefully, a better turnout. But what we're going to do is we're going to have everyone as a member of the panel. So instead of having a guest speaker, everyone who attends will be asked questions about their Blue Lodge, their Masonic experience, and other such things. It should be a lot of fun. And I'm still trying to line up speakers. If any of you are interested in giving a talk here in our Zoom meetings, you're more than welcome. Just message me and let me know what topic you'd like to present. I want to thank Brother Smith for participating, and we will have his contact info listed on our group page. So we do appreciate him coming out. We had to reschedule him once, and it's good to have him here today. So thank you all for coming. If anyone has anything else to offer, otherwise we need to wrap this up.
Thank you so very much. Shameless plug. I also have a presentation on Freemasonry in Rosslyn Chapel that is very well received. And if I do my job correctly, by the time I get to the end of it, you'll be equally disappointed and equally delighted.
Just like reading the Da Vinci Code, yes.
Yeah, right. Oh, I have fun at Dan Brown's expense. Don't think I don't.
Okay. Anyone else? Thank you all very much for coming out, brothers, and we'll see you again next week.
Thank you so much.